A break in a cold case in South Jersey. Half a century later, a man was murdered back in 1979, and now police finally know who the suspect was.
Yeah, detectives.
Investigators searched for who he was. They ran his information through every database available, year after year, decade after decade. Nothing came back. He simply had no identity. Until April of 2026. When a team of college students, using DNA technology that didn't exist when his bones were first found, finally gave him back his name. If you are new to this channel and you want to hear more stories like this one, stories about cold cases that were finally solved, about the forgotten finally being remembered, about the investigators and researchers who never gave up, please subscribe right now.
The Discovery. On June 2nd, 1979, in Quinton Township, Salem County, New Jersey, someone made a grim discovery. Off the side of Jericho Road, in a shallow grave dug into the earth, were the remains of a young man. Quinton Township sits in the rural, flat farmland of South Jersey, near the Delaware River. It's the kind of place where roads stretch between fields, where small communities are spread far apart, and where a body could be buried just off the shoulder of a road and not be discovered for months.
The years with no name. For the next several decades, this young man existed in the system only as Jericho Road John Doe. Investigators in Salem County worked the case using whatever tools were available to them at the time. They checked dental records. They checked missing persons reports. They tried to match what little physical evidence they had against any case, anywhere, that might connect to a young man who vanished sometime around the winter of 1978. Nothing came back. Think about what that means for a family, somewhere. Somewhere in 1978 or 1979, a young man stopped coming home. Maybe his family reported him missing. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they assumed he'd simply moved on, the way young people sometimes do, drifting from place to place without staying in touch. Either way, somewhere out there, a family spent decades not knowing that the person they'd lost was lying in an unmarked grave in Quinton Township, identified only by a case number. DNA testing technology improved through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Each time forensic science took a...
The Cold Case Unit tries again. In March of 2023, the New Jersey State Police Cold Case Unit decided to give this case one more chance. They referred it to a relatively new resource, the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo College of New Jersey. This center represented something different from how cold cases had been handled before. Instead of relying purely on law enforcement databases, which only contain DNA from people who have been arrested or convicted of crimes, investigative genetic genealogy works differently. It takes a genetic profile from unidentified remains.
The name. The Ramapo College IGG team got to work on the genetic profile from Jericho Road John Doe, and through careful genealogical research, tracing DNA matches outward, building family trees branch by branch, looking for where those scattered threads converged, they identified a potential candidate. His name was Robert Dean Irelan. Records showed that Robert Dean Irelan had most recently lived in Pleasantville, New Jersey, and was known to have spent time in Atlantic City. Both of those places are in South Jersey, not far, geographically, from where his remains were eventually found off Jericho Road in Salem County. Think about that for a moment. While investigators spent decades searching nationwide databases, running checks against missing persons reports from across the country, the answer may have been remarkably close to home all along. A young man who lived in Pleasantville, who spent time in Atlantic City, who sometime in the winter of 1978 ended up murdered and buried in a quiet rural township less than an hour away. With a name and a candidate identified, the New Jersey State Police needed one final step: confirmation. What we still don't know about where this case stands right now? Identifying Robert Dean Irelan answers one question, but it doesn't answer the most important one. Someone shot this young man in the head and buried him off the side of a rural road in the winter of 1978. That person has never been identified.
As of this video, this remains an open, unsolved homicide. For 47 years, investigators couldn't even begin to ask who might have wanted Robert Dean Irelan dead because they didn't know who he was. They couldn't look into his relationships, his associates, his life in Pleasantville or Atlantic City in the late 1970s, because to the entire criminal justice system, he didn't have an identity at all. Now, that changes. Now, the New Jersey State Police Cold Case Unit can start asking the questions that have been impossible to ask for almost 5 decades. Who did Robert Dean Irelan know? Who did he owe money to, or who was angry with him in the final months of 1978? Did anyone ever ask what happened to him? And if they did, was that question?
People who made this possible, it's worth pausing on how this case actually got solved. Because it wasn't solved by a big-budget crime lab or a famous detective. It was solved in large part by a college research center and the students who worked through its certificate program. The Investigative Genetic Genealogy Center at Ramapo College of New Jersey has become known for taking on exactly these kinds of cases. Cases that traditional law enforcement databases simply can't crack, because the missing piece isn't a criminal record. It's a family tree. Robert Dean Irelan's case is just one of many the center has worked.
In the winter of 1978, a young man named Robert Dean Irelan was shot and buried off a quiet road in rural New Jersey. For 47 years, he had no name, no headstone, and no answers. His case sat as a number in a file, while somewhere, a family may have spent decades wondering what happened to him. Never knowing the truth was buried less than an hour from where he used to live. In April of 2026, that changed. Through the patient work of genetic genealogy researchers, Robert Dean Irelan finally has his name back. His murder remains unsolved. But for the first time in almost half a century, investigators can finally start asking the right questions about who he was, who he knew, and who might have wanted him gone. If this story affected you, let us know in the comments. And if you want to see more cold cases brought back into the light, cases where one new piece of technology, one family tree, one team that refused to give up changed everything, make sure you're subscribed. We tell these stories every week.